Hello and welcome again to another edition of This Week in Christian History. And we are hanging out about a episode or an event that actually happened on January 28th, 1077, that involves church authority and papal authority, which is summed up maybe historically is known as the walk to Canossa. And what does that mean? And what does that really, what is that all about? So to help us unpack all of that, we're so very pleased to have Dr. Conrad Leyser, who is with us as Associate Professor of Medieval History at Worcester College at Oxford University. And Dr. Leyser, thanks for joining us. We appreciate it.
Please, my great pleasure. I look forward to
Absolutely.
this.
So let's kind of put this in context of where we are. There are I guess just like anything in history, it kind of depends on on what you think is important from the story. And
Hmm.
then very
Hmm.
often somebody nobody's looking up on Google today to see who the current Holy Roman Emperor is, right? Because they would be
Yeah.
disappointed to find out there's not one, right? But we still have a
Hmm.
pope, and so who ends up
Hmm.
writing the story at the end? Does the church or that, or who ends up pulling that together? We have just come out of really the Great Schism, right? Which has happened some just a
Hmm.
couple of decades before all of this, and so
Hmm.
the idea of more and more of papal authority and having the final say so on someone's
Hmm.
soul, and I may be simplifying that in a way that's not fair. This fits right into all of that, right? To this discussion point. So that was way more of a question and a statement than it was than a question to do. But give us some background, okay? Give us an idea of kind of the setting of who Henry IV is, the Holy Roman Emperor,
Hmm.
who is the current Pope at the time, Gregory the VII, and give
Hmm.
us a rundown on some of that.
Okay. Let's maybe start with the Holy Roman Empire,
Okay.
um, which is a kind of messy collection of kingdoms, that the rulers of which the emperors and they see themselves as kind of as Roman emperors. I mean, they counting back to when they what we would think of as the Roman Empire. Um, uh, in the Latin West, the last of the kind of fall of that empire happens at the end of the 5th century, 476. The Western emperor is deposed. In the East, the empire keeps going, comes to be known as Byzantium. In the West, there's then a gap until you get to Charlemagne, who big warlord conquests, gets himself crowned in Christmas Day 800 as Emperor of the Romans. And that's the point at which, as what we call the Holy Roman Empire, kind of kicks off. Um, uh, and yeah, with this idea of kind of who the big warlord in the West kind of recognized as an emperor by the Pope. Charlemagne's family keeps holding that title till the end of the ninth century, 888. Charles the Fat, the last legitimate member of that family, kind of he has no legitimate heir. Then there's a gap. 10th century, 962, the kings of Saxony, um, so further east than has Charlemagne's center of power has been. They're the most powerful warlords in the West. They get recognized as Roman emperors. And so coming forward into art where we're talking about today, the 11th century,
Mhm.
it's the descendants of those 10th century Saxon Empire who were now the Holy Roman Emperors. And Henry IV, um, kind of, I mean, his dad dies in when he's still a child.
Mhm.
Um, he's technically not yet been crowned emperor when at Canossa in the 1070s.
Ah,
He's King of Germany.
okay.
That's his title. So he will be crowned emperor, but that's later. It's 1081 after we're done with Canossa. So say he has kind of power over a kind of number of Kingdom of Germany, Kingdom of Italy, um, some bits kind of west of the Rhine, just about. So it's a kind of umbrella collection of polities
Mhm.
that he has to rule. Yeah, and to be recognized as emperor, he needs the Pope to do that. hasn't yet happened. When in the bit that we're talking about. Um, and we need to get back to his relationship with the Saxon nobility, which is just to put a pin is a key part of the story here. No, we don't need to go to that just this second.
Sure.
Right, that's him on one side.
Okay.
Meanwhile, you've got the papacy, which has, unlike the Holy Roman Empire, has seemingly an unbroken history from the first century through, as doubtless you are aware. But the Pope has, I mean, right until this moment, the Pope has basically been Bishop of Rome as a kind of local
Hmm.
figure. We're not, yeah, I mean, this is just what's happening, and what's at play here is a shift from the church as a whole to, from being a network of local churches to a big trans-regional, trans-political corporation. The Pope, right up until this moment, is basically, as I say, still a local ruler.
Mm.
Um, he doesn't have a lot of infrastructure. Um, what's what's in play is, yeah, it is a shift in his role. I mean, and here Rome is a big city. There are loads of saint shrines. People visit Rome. Um, yeah, and so there's a big tourism trade. But in terms of the church as an administrative structure, that's only just starting to take shape
Ah.
um, in this period. And what you've got from the second half of the 11th century onwards, um, in the so-called movement for church reform, is a bunch of people converging on Rome, convinced of two things. One is that the clergy need to operate according to new uniform standards of behavior, and two is that the Pope will be head of that new clerical or newly kind of burnished clerical corporation. And that's what's in play here. Now, Gregory the Seventh has been in Rome since the 1050s before he becomes Pope in 1073. I mean, his given name is Hildebrand. He's a Roman who's been for the past two and a half decades really at the center of this so-called kind of very ambitious reforming movement.
Okay.
Last thing to say before we go to
No, there's a
we
lot.
assume, yeah, there is a lot. We assume that this reforming clergy, reforming church movement is going to clash with the laity. That's not necessarily the case.
Mm.
And through the 1040s, 1050s, and 60s, and even into the mid 1070s, the clergy and the laity, and specifically the Pope and the Emperor or the King of Germany, have been cooperating in making this new church happen. So the conflict is not inevitable. And it's unusual, in fact, for there to be conflict. Um, um, so so it's one thing, yeah, thing to explain in Canossa is, yes, how come the Pope and the kind of king slash emperor are loggerheads when that's not their default setting.
What was there cooperation with laity outside of what we would think of as the Holy Roman Empire? I mean, was there that happening in Spain? Was that happening in, Britain? Was that happening in other places? Or is it just really kind of focused in what this amorphous thing that's like an amoeba that keeps moving called the Holy Roman Empire? Right? I mean, it never is. It's
Yeah.
always seems to me like it depends on what day you ask. We'll tell you what the map looks like. Ask me again in a year, and it may look something else different.
Okay, that's a great question. Fundamentally, yeah, I think the cooperation model is everywhere actually.
Okay.
And then we can think of this in a number of different ways. I mean, in some ways, at the level of um, spirituality, if you like, it's in the interests of the laity that the clergy are functioning effectively. Um, and the laity are also, it's worth mentioning monks and nuns here too. It's
Hmm.
in the laity's interests that the prayers of monks, nuns, and priests and the sacrifice that priests make at the altar with the Eucharist are effective. Um, and the laity are, crudely speaking, prepared to fund that.
Mm,
Um, so that's why the laity give to found monasteries or kind of make donations to bishoprics, so that they're the resources to do the work of intercession with the deity properly. Um, and in the sense that underneath that, as it were, spiritual slash moral symbiosis, there's they have a shared interest as landowners.
mm.
Um, and so it's in, they need to cooperate. I mean, yeah, again, kind of slightly, we're not crudely speaking, but yeah, they need to cooperate um, to make sure that all of their estates run properly and they're not involved in unnecessary property disputes, which is going to take them away from their core business and also, at worst, kind of potentially undermine the social order, which is in their interest to maintain. Um, so yeah, so we like to think of kind of and Canossa has taught us to think of kind of great conflict between the church and the state, but that's in some ways an illusion or not, yeah, not the default setting.
Well,
Um,
it's easy to assume, right? I mean,
exactly,
because
yeah,
it's
exactly.
a power struggle. You got one guy
Hmm.
over here that says, "Hey, I've got the go straight to hell card in my pocket that I can pull out if you don't act right." And I got another one over
Hmm.
here that says, "Yeah, but you got to function in my backyard and with my people and so who's in charge?" That's real easy and kind
Hmm.
of, it's not a hard dot to try to assume, right,
Hmm.
between
Hmm.
two entities like that. But in
Hmm.
order, as you're saying, hey, look, it doesn't mean like there was this secret handshake that we've decided this is how we're going to do. But both of these entities, and I wouldn't say sides even, I would just say that both of these entities really understand the value that each other brings to what is its core mission, if you will. This is what we're about the business of doing, of saving souls and doing others. And this is what we're
Hmm.
about the business and being able to have a kingdom or a whatever.
Hmm.
There's value that both of us realize the other are bringing to the table, but at the same time, the old saying, maybe the rising tide lifts all ships, right? That maybe it's good for
Right.
all for us to
Hmm.
do all of that. So maybe I'm off base, but I mean, is that
No, it's exactly right.
kind of close?
Exactly right. And I mean, since again, it's our instincts are to think institutionally, but we're the church is a big institution and the state is a big institution. Those are products of this key moment in the 11th century. We're not yet there.
Mhm.
So in that sense, kind of thinking of the social order in terms of households and families is a much kind of better way to proceed. Um, and we might think of it, let's say, a family where maybe in this period the older son would get the family lands, the younger son might go off into the church and not produce an heir, but still be have a living because there is church property. And
Mhm.
so in that sense, there's and there, daughters might either make kind of marriages to kind of benefit the two families involved in that matchmaking, or they might
Sure.
go into monasteries where again there's a kind of a property supported living that they can make. So that it's if once we start to think in terms of families as opposed to kind of clergy or laity or church and
Uh,
state, these the dynamics of how all this work kind of make a lot more sense.
wow.
Um,
What a fascinating conversation we're having, and we're just getting started, right? And so we're having a great conversation with Dr. Conrad Leyser about this famous thing called the walk to Canossa, and what
Mhm.
all is involved in all of that. So, building up to that, um, was there any intrigue or controversy at all in Gregory's ascension to being the Bishop of Rome? I mean, I mean, we think through about the times, right? Like with with the Borgias or the this or others that would be later
Mhm.
with other, popes coming to power or what that might look like, the de Medici or any of those, right? We're not really talking about those kinds of things, are we, as far
Mhm.
as what it means for him to actually get to the papacy, or was it a pretty easy path?
I mean, again, it's super interesting, and maybe not quite the Borgias, but yeah, I mean, again, we've just been talking about families,
Sure.
and the Roman aristocracy is one of the most kind of liveliest and kind of most self-important, exuberantly self-important group in this period, and well documented as well. So in this just kind of big picture is one family has dominated the papacy um, kind of from through the beginning of the 10th into the mid 11th centuries.
Okay.
Um, and right in the 1040s, their monopoly of papal office is broken open, and
Mm.
new families kind of come in to there's a shift in kind of the city politics. And Hildebrand, or Gregory as he will become, it has the support of those new families.
Ah,
Um, um, so yeah, I mean, again, for important to understand, again, he has powerful lay patrons and patrons in the city of Rome. Also enemies.
sure. Because you're
Uh,
fighting the old guard, so to speak, right? I
yeah,
mean,
yeah,
who are
yeah. Or
entrenched
even.
into it, and it's good work if you can get it, right? If you got some good
Mhm.
papal office that, maybe is something that benefits you personally and otherwise. I mean, who in the heck wants to give that stuff up, right? You're not just voluntarily
Right,
saying,
right.
well, I'm walking
And
away,
again, even
right?
with the new families, and the contest kind of internal squabbles, if you like, for kind of pieces of the pie. And so, um, I mean, two things to note about his election and kind of immediate coming into power. I mean, one is he's elected um, by by the crowd, by kind of pop. He's very good at demagoguery.
Hmm.
So that's if you like, in terms of strict procedure, he doesn't follow that. His election doesn't follow those rules. In 1059, they've set out new rules for how the Pope should be elected by the College of Cardinals, as is now. But his election, just over 10 years later, doesn't follow that pattern.
Interesting.
And two, he in Christmas of 1075, kind of in the right before the period that we're going to be kind of looking at in detail,
Hmm.
he's taken captive and has to spend a week in prison at one of his enemies. So yeah, so he's. I mean, Rome is a bubbling pot, and he does real well for a period there, but he's getting in 1085, he kind of famously says, I have loved righteousness and hated iniquity, and therefore I die in exile. He
Mm.
out of the city. It's a kind of galling for this son of Rome eventually, yeah, to kind of be expelled, and spending his last days kind of not in the city that he's kind of lived most and worked most of his time. So that's him. It's
Mm. Hmm.
he's a powerful Roman politician, um, but so that does come with real dangers as well.
Absolutely. Well, let's talk about this
Mhm.
particular interaction. We'll call it that.
Mhm.
Maybe it's a standoff. Maybe it isn't. Maybe it's a what leads to this thing that would make us to be able to say, this is the day that we're using as an example, as a way to go talk about all of this
Mhm.
of the day that uh, Pope Gregory rescinded or clawed back. I don't know what the right verb is, right? I mean, removes the excommunication, right, of Henry. But
Mhm.
nonetheless, how do we get to the spot that this
Yeah.
walking in the snow and the 3 days in
Uh-huh.
the barefoot and all
Okay.
the rest of the
Yeah.
stories, what built up to
Yeah.
that?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. It's quite a thing. Um.
Yeah.
Uh. So. Um. It starts really. Yeah. So initially, since there's not necessarily any problem between the new Pope Gregory and King Henry IV, and they write each other in kind of nice, in kind of early tens, from 1073, 1074, initially quite kind of cooing each other letters about how they're all, yeah, we're going to work together. None of us like corruption in the clergy. We want to stamp out the practice of so-called simony, the buying and selling of a church office, and we
Hmm.
want to stamp out clerical marriage. Those are the two things that the reform movement that I mentioned earlier is kind of really aimed at doing, and we can talk more about that. Um, Gregory, however, is so keen to have these things happen that what he starts to do is to entertain accusations of corruption against German bishops,
Mm.
um, uh, really, regardless of what Henry, the protector of those bishops, and the bishops themselves say. Um, so yeah, which the bishops, those German bishops really don't like.
Mm.
And they find, how, we're supposed, and also they don't understand, we're all bishops together. How come you're attacking us? Um, and again, how come you're, listening to kind of random accusations against us?
Mm.
What's going on? Um, um, and so that's where so the initial conflict, I would say, is between Gregory and German bishops.
Okay.
Henry comes in behind his bishops because he's like, hang on, what's going on here? Um, um, and so that ratchets up to the point that in January of 1076 at Worms, there's an assembly he holds with his bishops, and they call him Hildebrand, not by his papal name. They say, Hildebrand, you are you've lost it. You're a schismatic. Um, uh, you have no more credibility as Pope.
Mm.
Descend is kind of their decree says. Get off the throne. Um, Gregory hears about this, and
The
one thing to
throne of
emphasize,
Peter, right?
the
That's
throne
the
of
throne.
Peter. Yeah,
Right. We're talking
yeah.
about the throne
So,
of Peter.
so
Right. Right.
we're,
Right.
we're done.
Okay.
So Henry swings in behind his bishops to kind of say, that yeah, you have lost it as Pope. You no longer carry credibility. You don't deserve the allegiance of my bishops because of the way you're mistreating them.
Mm.
Gregory hears about this, and at the start of the Lenten Synod in February of 1076. And again, it's one thing to kind of remember with all of this, it takes so long for news to travel.
Sure.
These days, something happens and it's around the world in the press of a button. For our standards, this is all kind of underwater chess of that, it
Right.
takes a minimum 3 weeks for a word to get across the Alps. Um, Gregor retaliates by saying, okay, well, Henry, no, I won't be resigning. I excommunicate you. Um, for your defense, for your defiant defense of your bishops, it's you who need to, you're disobeying me as Pope. Um, you need to, I shut you out from more churches.
Mm.
Um, um, that's, and so that, so that's nearly a full 12 months before Canossa, you can tell. We're only 1076 here.
Hmm.
Um, That's a problem for Henry, partly because it puts his bishops in a difficult position because being excommunicated is yeah, it's a big deal. Um, but crucially because his own position in Germany is weak.
Mm.
And here we get back to the Saxon rebels who I mentioned a little bit earlier.
Sure.
Since 1073, he's faced a revolt from the Saxon nobility against his authority as emperor, because he's from a bit different bit of Germany in the southwest. They're up there in Saxony, and there's a breakdown in relations between them. Maybe we can go into that more if you think people would be interested. But that's the in terms of understanding Canossa and this standoff between the Pope and Henry IV, it's a triangle.
Mm.
Then the Saxon nobility are the key other players. And that's Henry's big weakness. And Gregory realizes, right, whatever I may or may not have overstepped, but he's come at me, I've come back at him. If I really want to get at him, I need to I need to and about how this is going to go.
Dr. Laser,
You've frozen a
we
second. Can
froze
you still hear
up.
me?
Yes, I'm sorry. I really hate to
Yeah.
ask it, but, well, and we'll edit this part out. But we did have a freeze up there. I
Oh,
don't know if
heck.
it was my end or your end. So can you go back to the whole, as we were talking about the triangulation piece, right? Henry is understanding, or rather Gregory is understanding. He and oh crud.